Listen to me carefully. Your home does not need more money, more space, or more opinions. Your home needs alignment, because when heaven aligns with your household, everything shifts. Peace shows up, provision follows, confusion leaves, and generations change direction. Most people wait for circumstances to improve before they pray, but kingdom people pray first, and then circumstances are forced to follow. One prayer, spoken with authority, can reset the atmosphere of your entire house. I'm not talking about a religious prayer. I'm talking about a strategic declaration that activates heaven's resources over your family. Your children don't just inherit your DNA, they inherit your spiritual decisions. What you pray today becomes their future tomorrow. So if you're ready to stop surviving and start building a home heaven can bless, stay with me, because this prayer is about to change everything. Let me tell you something most people never realize. Prayer is not religious. Prayer is government. And until you understand that, you'll keep approaching prayer like it's a last resort instead of your first line of defense. See, religion teaches you to beg. Religion teaches you to plead. Religion teaches you to hope something might change someday. But the kingdom teaches you to legislate. The kingdom teaches you to speak. The kingdom teaches you to declare. When you pray from a kingdom mindset, you are not asking heaven for permission. You are partnering with heaven to enforce what God already said belongs to you. That means when you open your mouth in prayer, you're not just talking into the air. You're issuing a command into the spirit realm. You're setting spiritual policy over your household. You're deciding what is allowed to stay and what must leave. Because whether you know it or not, every home already operates under spiritual laws. The question is not whether your house has spiritual governance. The question is whose governance is running it. Most people let circumstances govern their homes. They let fear govern their homes. They let past trauma govern their homes. They let financial pressure govern their homes. But when you step into prayer with authority, you're saying, not here, not in my house, not in my family. You are establishing divine order where chaos tried to move in. Prayer is not you asking God to do something. Prayer is you agreeing with what God already said and enforcing it on earth. That's why the Bible says whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth is loosed in heaven. Heaven is waiting on earth to speak. Heaven is waiting on you to take your place. And here's what most people miss. Authority doesn't come from how loud you pray. Authority doesn't come from how emotional you get. Authority comes from alignment. When your words line up with God's word, heaven backs your voice. You don't have to scream when you know who you are. You don't have to beg when you understand your position. Kings don't negotiate with problems. Kings issue decrees. So when you pray over your household, you're not throwing up wishes. You're setting policy. You're declaring peace where stress tried to dominate. You're declaring provision where lack tried to settle in. You're declaring protection where fear tried to take root. You're declaring purpose over your children before confusion ever gets a chance. And listen, your house doesn't change because time passes. Your house changes because authority shows up. Some of you have been waiting on situations to improve before you start praying boldly, but bold prayer is what improves situations. Some of you have been waiting until everything feels right, but faith doesn't wait for feelings. Faith speaks first. Faith moves first. Faith establishes first. When you understand prayer as government, you stop praying reactive prayers and you start praying proactive prayers. You stop responding to problems and you start preventing them. You stop letting life happen to your family and you start deciding what kind of life your family will live. Because every time you pray with intention, you are writing spiritual legislation over your home. You are saying, in this house, we walk in peace. In this house, we walk in favor. In this house, we walk in wisdom. In this house, our children are covered. In this house, our finances are aligned. You're not just saying words, you're building an atmosphere, and atmosphere determines outcomes. That's why two homes on the same street can experience completely different realities. Same economy, same city, same opportunities, but different spiritual climates. One house operates in faith, the other operates in fear. One house operates in expectation, the other operates in survival. One house has someone who understands authority, the other house is hoping things somehow work out. See, when you pray, you're not inviting God into your home. God is already present. You're activating what's been waiting. You're turning potential into manifestation. You're opening doors that were already unlocked. And this is why one prayer can shift everything. Not because the words are magical, but because authority is being exercised, because alignment is taking place, because heaven recognizes someone on earth has decided to take responsibility. You don't need 10 hours. You don't need perfect language. You don't need to impress anybody. You just need to understand who you are and speak from that place. When you pray once with revelation, you can reset years of disorder. So today, don't pray like someone hoping for change. Pray like someone authorized to create it. Because when you speak with kingdom authority, heaven moves, hell listens, and your household shifts. And that's when everything begins to change. Let me take you a little deeper, because once you understand authority in prayer, the next thing you have to master is this. Your words are not neutral. Your words are builders. Your words are architects. Your words are setting the climate of your household every single day, whether you realize it or not. See, every home has an atmosphere. You can feel it when you walk in. Some homes feel peaceful. Some homes feel tense. Some homes feel joyful. Some homes feel heavy. That atmosphere didn't happen by accident. It was created. And most of the time, it was created by the words that live there. Your house runs on conversation. What you consistently say becomes what your family eventually experiences. If stress is always being spoken, stress will always be present. If fear is always being declared, fear will always feel comfortable. But when faith becomes the language of your home, everything starts responding to a higher frequency, because words carry power. You don't just speak words, you release direction. You don't just talk, you program outcomes. That's why you can't afford to be careless with your mouth. Every statement is either reinforcing heaven or giving space to chaos. Some people unknowingly curse their own homes with phrases like, "We're always struggling. Nothing ever works out for us. My kids never listen. Money disappears as soon as it comes." They say it jokingly, they say it casually, but the spirit realm doesn't hear jokes. It hears declarations. Whatever you repeat, you authorize. So when you keep saying your children are difficult, they become difficult. When you keep saying your marriage is hard, it stays hard. When you keep saying you're broke, your mind keeps looking for evidence to agree with your mouth. But the moment you shift your language, you shift your atmosphere. Now you start saying, "My household walks in peace. My children are wise. My home is protected. We attract favor. Provision flows to this family." And at first, it may feel unfamiliar. At first, it may feel forced. That's because you're changing systems. You're rewiring spiritual patterns. You're introducing heaven's vocabulary into an environment that may have been speaking survival for years. But consistency changes climate. Listen, you don't need perfect circumstances to speak faith. You speak faith to create better circumstances. You don't wait until your children act right to bless them. You bless them so they grow into who they're called to be. You don't wait until your finances look good to declare abundance. You declare abundance so your decisions start lining up with prosperity. Your mouth is the thermostat of your home. If it's too cold spiritually, turn it up with praise. If it's too tense emotionally, turn it down with peace-filled words. If fear is creeping in, adjust the temperature with truth. Because atmospheres respond to authority, and authority is released through speech. And here's something powerful. Your children are always listening, even when they look distracted. Your spouse is always absorbing, even when they seem quiet. The energy of your words is shaping how they see themselves and what they believe is possible. That means every blessing you speak is planting identity. Every affirmation you release is building confidence. Every prayer you declare is constructing their future. You are not just raising kids, you are raising expectations. So stop letting frustration talk. Stop letting exhaustion speak louder than vision. Stop letting temporary problems become permanent vocabulary. You don't have to deny reality, but you must refuse to be ruled by it. There's a difference. You can acknowledge a challenge and still declare victory. You can recognize pressure and still speak peace. You can see lack and still release provision. That's maturity. That's kingdom thinking. Because when your words change, your behavior changes. When your behavior changes, your results change. And when your results change, generations benefit. Some of you are one conversation away from a breakthrough, one consistent declaration away from peace, one shift in language away from alignment, one intentional prayer away from resetting your household. So starting today, speak like someone who knows heaven is backing them. Speak like someone who understands their home is sacred ground. Speak like someone who refuses to let fear be the loudest voice in the room. Let faith be louder. Let peace be louder. Let purpose be louder. Because the words you speak today are building the reality your family will live in tomorrow. And when you choose faith-filled language, your home begins to rise to meet it. Let's go even deeper, because once you understand that prayer is government and your words create atmosphere, the next revelation changes everything. Heaven does not respond to emotion. Heaven responds to authority. Most people think if they cry harder, beg longer, or sound more desperate, God will move faster. But tears don't move heaven. Panic doesn't activate angels. Frustration doesn't release favor. Alignment does. God is not impressed by volume. He is moved by position. You can be emotional and still powerless, or you can be calm and full of authority. Authority doesn't come from how intense you feel. It comes from knowing who you are and standing in agreement with what God already said. That's why some people pray for years and see very little change, while others pray once and things shift immediately. It's not because one person is more loved, it's because one person understands alignment. Alignment means your words match God's word. Your expectations match God's promises. Your actions match your prayers. When those three line up, heaven releases resources. See, faith without alignment is just hope, but faith with alignment becomes power. You can't declare peace while feeding chaos. You can't pray for provision while living in disorder. You can't ask for clarity while entertaining confusion. Heaven responds when your life says yes to what your mouth is asking for. That's why authority starts on the inside before it ever shows up on the outside. Some of you are praying for breakthroughs, but God is waiting on structure. You're asking for increase, but heaven is looking for discipline. You're crying out for miracles, but alignment is what opens the door, because alignment puts you in position. Think about it. When a police officer steps into traffic and raises their hand, cars stop. Not because of the officer's emotions, not because of their personal power, but because they are aligned with the authority behind the badge. They don't scream at the cars, they don't negotiate with the drivers, they simply stand in position, and heaven works the same way. When you pray from alignment, you're not trying to convince God, you're representing God. You're standing in spiritual position and saying, this is what heaven has already decided. That's why Jesus didn't beg storms to calm down. He spoke to them. That's why he didn't plead with sickness. He commanded it. That's why he didn't argue with lack. He multiplied provision. He moved in alignment. So when you pray over your household, don't pray like a victim. Pray like a representative. Don't pray like you're unsure. Pray like someone who understands their assignment, because your authority is activated when your obedience is consistent. You can't pray for order while living in compromise. You can't declare blessing while tolerating dysfunction. You can't ask for peace while constantly speaking negativity. Alignment means your lifestyle backs your language. And this is where many people get stuck. They want God to move without them moving first. But alignment requires participation. You forgive when heaven says forgive. You release bitterness when heaven says release. You adjust habits when heaven says adjust. You change conversations when heaven says change them. And as soon as you move into alignment, heaven responds. Not slowly, not reluctantly, immediately. Because God is always ready. He's just waiting for you to get in position. Some of you don't need a new prayer. You need a new posture. Some of you don't need louder declarations. You need deeper obedience. Some of you don't need another emotional moment. You need alignment in your daily choices. Once your private life lines up with your public prayers, things start accelerating, your home shifts faster, your peace stabilizes, your clarity increases, your confidence grows. Because now you're not just asking, you're agreeing. And agreement is powerful. Agreement with heaven creates momentum on earth. That's why when you pray, you don't have to force it. You don't have to strain. You don't have to work yourself up. You simply stand in faith and speak from alignment. You say, peace, be here. You say provision flow. You say confusion leave. You say favor manifest. Not with arrogance, with authority, not with pride, with confidence, because you know heaven is backing every word. So today, stop praying emotional prayers and start praying aligned prayers. Let your life match your language. Let your obedience fuel your declarations. Let your discipline support your faith. And when you do, heaven will respond. It is not because you begged, but because you stood in position. And that's when everything starts moving. Now let me show you something that will stretch your thinking. Because once you understand prayer as government, once you understand that your words create atmosphere, and once you realize heaven responds to alignment, here's the next level. Your prayers don't stop with you. Your prayers travel forward. Most people pray only about what they can see. They pray about bills, schedules, stress, and situations. But kingdom-minded people pray beyond the moment. They pray into legacy. They pray into generations. They pray into bloodlines. Because you are not just a person living a life, you are a gateway standing in a family line. Everything that flows to your children flows through you first. That means what you tolerate can become inherited. What you allow can become normalized. But here's the good news. What you transform can become permanent. One prayer, spoken with revelation, can interrupt cycles that have been running for decades. Some of you come from families where struggle was normal, fear was common, broken relationships were expected, lack was familiar, but you don't have to pass that forward. You have the authority to stop it right where you stand. You are not responsible for what happened before you, but you are responsible for what happens after you. That's why prayer is so powerful. Prayer gives you the ability to edit your family story. You can say, it stops with me. You can say, this pattern ends here. You can say, my children will not repeat this. And heaven listens, because when you pray with understanding, you're not just asking for help, like you're rewriting outcomes. Some of you are carrying generational stress that didn't start with you. You're managing emotional weight that you inherited. You're dealing with financial habits that were modeled for you. But prayer allows you to introduce a new system. You can bless what was broken. You can heal what was ignored. You can realign what was distorted. And listen carefully, your children don't just inherit your genetics. They inherit your beliefs. They inherit your language. They inherit your expectations. That means every prayer you pray over them is shaping their future identity. When you declare wisdom over them, they grow into wisdom. When you declare favor over them, they walk into favor. When you declare protection over them, heaven assigns guardians. You're not just speaking hope, you're programming destiny. Some parents wait until their children get older to start praying seriously. But the earlier you start, the deeper the roots go. Even when they don't understand your words, their spirits recognize authority. Even when they seem distracted, heaven is taking notes. Your prayers are building invisible infrastructure around their lives. That's why you don't pray small prayers. You don't just pray that they do well in school. You pray that they discover purpose. You don't just pray that they stay out of trouble. You pray that they walk in calling. You don't just pray that they survive. You pray that they lead, because survival is not the goal. Transformation is. And here's something powerful. Even if your children are already grown, prayer still works. Distance does not cancel authority. Age does not limit impact. Geography does not stop heaven. You can pray over adult children. You can pray over grandchildren you haven't met. You can pray over generations you'll never see. Because prayer operates outside of time. One aligned prayer today can protect decisions made years from now. Some of you are the first in your family to think differently. You're the first to pursue growth. You're the first to seek God intentionally. That's not random. That's assignment. You were chosen to be the interruption. And when you pray, you activate that assignment. You tell poverty it no longer has permission. You tell fear it no longer gets passed down. You tell confusion it no longer lives here. You establish a new spiritual standard. And standards shape futures. That's why your consistency matters. That's why your declarations matter. That's why your alignment matters. Because what you do in private is echoing into generations. You may never fully see the impact of every prayer you pray, but heaven does. Your family will, your bloodline will. So don't underestimate the power in your voice. Don't minimize the authority on your life. Don't think small about what one prayer can do. One prayer can cancel decades of dysfunction. One prayer can unlock generational favor. One prayer can redirect an entire family line. You are not just changing your household, you are changing history, and it starts the moment you decide to pray with purpose. Now let's bring it all together, because once you understand that prayer is government, your words create atmosphere, heaven responds to alignment, and one prayer can shift generations. Here's the final piece that makes everything sustainable. Blessed homes are built on spiritual order. Nothing powerful happens by accident. Peace doesn't randomly show up. Prosperity doesn't casually arrive. Strong families don't just happen. Everything that lasts is constructed, and every construction requires order. God does not bless confusion. God blesses structure. Some people want the results of a blessed home without the discipline of building one. They want harmony without habits. They want favor without foundations. But blessing flows where order lives. That means if you want a home heaven can bless, you don't just pray occasionally, you build intentionally. You establish rhythms. You create consistency. You decide what's allowed in your environment and what's not. You don't let chaos have free access to your space. You don't let negativity dominate conversations. You don't let distractions raise your children. You take responsibility for the spiritual architecture of your house, because order creates capacity. When your home is aligned, peace has room to operate. When your home is aligned, provision finds pathways. When your home is aligned, clarity replaces confusion. And alignment doesn't start with perfection. It starts with priority. You decide what comes first. Does prayer have a place in your daily routine? Does gratitude live in your conversations? Does growth matter in your household? Does respect shape how you speak to each other? These are not small things. These are spiritual building blocks. Some homes are exhausted not because life is hard, but because there's no structure. Everything is reactive. Everything is rushed. Everything is emotional. But when you introduce order, you introduce stability. And stability attracts blessing. That's why your home needs spiritual systems, not just spiritual moments. Moments inspire you. Systems sustain you. You don't just pray when there's a crisis. You pray because it's who you are. You don't just speak life when things feel good. You speak life because it's your standard. You don't just align when pressure hits. You live aligned so pressure doesn't overwhelm you. Order is what makes your prayers effective long term, because you can pray for peace, but if your home is filled with constant arguments, peace has nowhere to land. You can pray for abundance, but if there's no stewardship, abundance can't stay. You can pray for unity, but if there's no respect, unity won't survive. Prayer invites heaven. Order gives heaven room. And here's something powerful. Order always starts with leadership. Someone has to go first. Someone has to set the tone. Someone has to model the behavior. Someone has to decide that this house will be different, and that someone is you. You don't wait for everyone else to change. You change first. You don't wait for perfect conditions. You create them. You don't wait for motivation. You move with intention. Because when one person commits to spiritual order, the whole house begins to shift. Your consistency becomes contagious, your discipline becomes visible, your peace becomes magnetic, and suddenly what used to feel heavy starts feeling lighter. What used to feel chaotic starts finding rhythm. What used to feel impossible starts becoming manageable, not because life got easier, but because your home got stronger. See, blessed homes aren't loud, they're aligned. They're built on prayer, but also on principles. They're filled with faith, but also with follow-through. They carry God's presence, but also personal responsibility. That's the balance. You don't just ask God to bless your home. You build something He can bless. You create space for communication. You protect time for connection. You prioritize growth over comfort. You choose peace over pride. These daily decisions become the framework for favor, and over time, your home becomes a refuge, a place of clarity, a place of strength, a place where your children feel safe, your family feels supported, and heaven feels welcome. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is aligned. So today, don't just pray for your household, build it. Build it with intentional words. Build it with consistent faith. Build it with spiritual discipline. Build it with love that leads. Because when prayer meets order, heaven responds. And that's how you create a home heaven can bless.